Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 4th of May of 2023. But before we start, let's discuss a little bit events that took place around Ukraine. If you remember, 2 days ago some special forces attacked Kremlin using drones. The Russian sources are saying that attack was made by the Ukrainian special forces. The Ukrainians are saying that attack was made by the Russian rich people, Russian oligarchs. But anyway, if you remember, yesterday Zelensky took a decision to visit Finland and he moved to Finland. And he was almost the entire day in Finland yesterday. But after the Russians published a piece of news about the attack against Kremlin, Zelensky changed his plan and took a decision to move to the Netherlands, and currently he is located in the Netherlands. Zelensky had a lot of meetings in that country. He talked with the main authorities, the top authorities of this country. They were discussing the upcoming counter-offensive operation in Ukraine. Zelensky was asking the authorities of the Netherlands to support and provide him F-16. The Netherlands authorities reported that they don't see any problems to do that. So I suppose that possibly the Netherlands are going to be the first country that will support Ukraine with Western weapon. I'm talking about the F-16 aircrafts. For example, the leader of France haven't given any opinion about the situation with the attack against Kremlin, and the same situation, we haven't seen any reaction of the authorities of London, official London. But we know that this week the official London authorities reported that they would provide Ukraine more bombs and more rockets with a very wide range. When talking about the North America, there are different opinions and different opinions from this part of the world. For example, the President of the United States of America, Joe Biden, reported, and the official position of the President of the United States of America is that the United States of America doesn't have any connections to that situation with attack against Kremlin. But from the other side, Donald Trump reported recently, have told us that if he would be a president, then if he was a president, he would finish the special military operation within the next 24 hours. We see that the situation in the United States of America is very difficult, and we are like at the beginning of the election campaign. Another opinion we received from the leader of China. He told us that this situation is very dangerous, and that it is very dangerous to use such methods of war. Of course, it's a better situation to start negotiation process, but if there are no possibility to start negotiation process, it is better not to use any drones and to attack each other, or at least the leaders of two countries. He told us something like this, not the strict words, but something like this. And now let's move to the Ukraine and let's discuss the situation on the ground. Today we received a lot of very interesting updates from the ground, from the front lines, and the most important, of course, as usually, are coming from Bakhmut. They are coming from Bilohorivka, and the most important updates are coming from Vuhledar. If you remember, yesterday the Ukrainians made some kind of offensive operation from Orekhov. They have accumulated enough of forces in the vicinity of Orekhov. They made like recall in combat. The Ukrainians were defeated, and for example, today, during the day, the Russians published a lot of video and photo confirmations of destroyed armored vehicles, of explosions, and so on. Anyway, the Ukrainians were defeated during that counter-offensive operation, and the Russians are saying that as a result of clashes during those, on the entire front line, the Ukrainians lost just 45 soldiers, 7 armored vehicles, and 3 artillery systems. But this morning, not morning, but somewhere afternoon time, the Ukrainians and the Russian sources reported that the Ukrainians launched another offensive operation from Vuhledar. They used 2 waves of attack, the first one in direction of Pavlovka and the second one through the northern residential area of Vuhledar in direction of Nikolska in this area. And there were a lot of different updates from this area. At the beginning, the Russians were saying that there is a fierce clashes, fierce fightings in this area, and other sources were saying that there is almost like a close combat when the Russians and the Ukrainians were fighting not even with the bullets and weapons but with knives, so there was a very close combat. The Ukrainians, according to the Russian sources, started storming these forest lines that lay between Vuhledar and Nikolsk and Pavlovka. And some sources are saying that the Ukrainians were pretty effective, pretty successful, and some sources were saying that they managed even to establish control over the Russian trenches and Russian fortifications, and they forced the Russians to step back a little bit. I'm not saying that the entire front line has been collapsed and so on. The Ukrainians just shortened the gray zone, and I believe that they're preparing before more aggressive and more powerful attacks in direction of the global direction of Volnovakha. In this area, with one purpose, to cut supply roads between the mainland and Zaporozhye area. As you can see, currently we see like two attacks on the same front line, and of course possibly, and as if you ask me, the most obvious, a little bit speculation on my side, the most obvious attack is to cut this salient from the Russian side by attacking and releasing the and finally to securing Velika Novoselovka. Possibly we're going to see this attack as well. Now we're going to Donetsk front line, and let's talk a little bit about the capital of DPR. As you can see, there are also a lot of icons in this area, but the most interesting updates are coming from the north of Avdiivka. Today the Russians published a video and photo confirmation that 20 soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers, took a decision to surrender, and the Russians are saying that mainly it was the newly mobilized forces without proper trainings and without proper skills, so that's why these soldiers, when they were deployed in this area under Russian fire, took a decision to surrender and to stop fighting. Very interesting updates are coming from Bakhmut. As you can see, there are a lot of icons. Today we received more and more confirmations about the living road, about more destroyed armored vehicles and tanks along this road. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of fierce clashings inside the western part of Bakhmut, the Russians managed to establish control over more 2 blocks in this area. For example, during the previous 3 days, 3 reports, or even 4, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation haven't reported about any progress in the western part of Bakhmut. I believe that there was very fierce fightings there, so that's why the Russians were maybe they made some kind of regrouping, maybe there were so many Ukrainians that they couldn't develop or something like this. But anyway, very interesting updates is coming from this area as well. If you remember, yesterday we discussed that the some forces of 60th Mechanized Brigade, as a result of fierce fightings and pressure from the Russian side, took a decision to not to follow the Ukrainians' orders and to leave their position. So that event took place yesterday. And today, for example, the Russian sources are saying that they managed to capture some number of forces of the 93rd Mechanized Brigade. I believe that these two events are tightly connected, and we see slowly, very slow, but step-by-step process of entire collapsing of defense of Bakhmut. For the last 2 days, we received an piece of news that some forces of Ukrainian army took a decision to leave their positions, and today we receive a piece of news that Ukrainians, the forces of 93rd Mechanized Brigade took a decision to surrender and not to continue fighting. Furthermore, one more time, the Russians are saying that was also newly mobilized forces who didn't have, let's say, reading quotes, sins in front of Russian forces. So that's why it was a very easy decision to surrender, because they understand that the Russians they kept them alive. First of all, because we remember that Prigozhin a few weeks ago told us that the Wagners were not going to take any more prisoners, but we see that they have changed their situation, and I believe that within the next few days we're going to see more and more surrender, like people who will take a decision to surrender in this area. Very interesting updates are coming from Bilohorivka, from this area. For example, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported for like the 3rd or 4th or 10th time in a row that in this area the Russians continue attacking and bombing the positions of 54th Mechanized Brigade, of 81st Air Assault Brigade. So the same brigades, the same titles, the same numbers, the same forces. The Russians reported that they managed to destroy ammo depot of 54th Mechanized Brigade, that they attacked the positions of 54th Mechanized Brigade, and all this activity is mainly connected with the fact that the Russians during the previous 2 days were trying to storm this industrial area. And maybe for the first time since maybe the September of the last year, the Russians start calling and start talking about Special Forces Akhmat, because as I understand, this is exactly the forces that currently are storming this industrial zone. Furthermore, some Russian sources are saying that they managed to capture this area, and currently the front line in this area looks like something like this. The Russians are saying that yesterday they managed to cover with artillery this area, and after that they sent these special forces Akhmat to clear this territory. Those special forces managed to capture this area. Later, the Ukrainians, when they understood that the Russians entered this fortification, started artillery fire against this industrial zone, and after that they launched their own counter-offensive operation, and as a result of that attack they managed to encircle the special forces inside of this industrial zone. And they were trying to encircle and, let's say, to create a cauldron in this area, but those special forces called for help, and the Russians start actively bombing this area, and after a few hours of fierce clashes, the Russian forces managed to deblocate those special forces, and currently this area is cleared under Russian control. I believe that the Russians will activate their movements in this area, but I believe that the next step is to attack the Ukrainians from the south, trying to penetrate and to penetrate the Ukrainian positions of 51st Mechanized Brigade that are currently located in this area. The Russians are saying that as a result of fierce clashes on the Liman and Kupiansk front line, as a result of storming operation, bombings, and breaking of rotation process, the Ukrainians lost something around 100 soldiers, 10 armored vehicles, including 1 tank, and 2 artillery systems. But there are no changes on the ground. The only thing that we should mention is that the level of losses of the Ukrainians on the Kupiansk front line has been reduced. It was like 70-75 soldiers per day today, and today we see that the losses are just 30 soldiers. Very interesting updates are coming from the Black Sea. We discussed this in my morning videos of the local time. The Ukrainians continue attacking and bombing the Russian facilities in Crimea and on the territory of the old Russia, as the Russians call this territory, and as a result of another drone attack, the Ukrainians managed to damage another fuel oil refinery that the Russians were using for supporting the Russian forces in Crimea and the south of Ukraine, and the most important, for supporting of Russian naval fleet. This evening the Ukrainians launched another wave of drones in Crimea, trying to destroy the Russian position, to suppress and to stress the Russian air defense forces. So we'll see what this night is going to happen. From the Russian side, the Russians reported that as a result of missile attack, they managed to destroy another headquarters of the, let's say, of the army of group by the name of South. We can find this tactical group, this operational command South in Nikolaev. So we remember that these days, during the previous week, maybe the Russians made 2 or 3 waves of attack in this town, and now the Russians provided us the piece of information that as a result of one of those attacks, the Ukrainians lost the entire operational command South. Furthermore, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians made a lot of attacks in Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, in Kharkiv as usually, but for now they still haven't provided us any updates, any numbers about the loss from the Ukrainian side. Very interesting question. The Russian segment of internet asked about the situation with oil refinery in the central part of Ukraine, Kremenchuk oil refinery, and the Russians are saying that this oil refinery still works, and this Ukrainians use this oil refinery for supporting their forces that are preparing before the greatest counter-offensive operation to the south. Possibly the Russians, right before the launch of the Ukrainian counter-offensive operation, will try to destroy this oil refinery or to damage this oil refinery as much as possible. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.